Age appropriate conversations. The much needed conversation we need to have with other adults, parents, guardians, educators, teachers, anybody who is going to interact with someone who is a minor, especially during their developmental primary developmental stages. I'm going to do my best to try to keep this short and sweet and to the point, but I'm not making any promises because if you watch any of my videos, I can talk and I enjoy what I'm talking about. But I don't think this requires a lot of explaining. I just want to put this in plain terms so people get what I'm saying to be able to apply it to their parenting or coaching or whatever you're doing to your life and make it work for you. So essentially, age appropriate conversations is having a conversation at the developmentally appropriate level for the person you are communicating with. The way you talk to a 3-year old is probably a little different than the way you talk to a 4-year old, which will be probably significantly different than how you talk to a 5-year old. You can go back and watch my video about Erik Erikson's stages of development because at each stage, the way a child, which is a person, thinks and understands and conceptualizes varies significantly. And so the way you communicate, what you communicate, how much you communicate matters. A big thing I like people to consider is when it comes to applying consequences, which I will talk about in another video on punishment versus consequences, is that when you're applying consequences for unwanted behavior, depending on when you respond, and this could be a reward too, how you react to a child's behavior matters based on their age. And it has to be appropriate to their age because if you delay it too long, it is no longer connected to the behavior because of their developmental stage. They not thinking about it anymore. Like it's out of sight, out of mind. So we have to always consider how kids process the information we are giving them when we are interacting with them, whether it's punishment, reward, conversation, or anything of the sort. So how old they are matters. And you just have to consider what do these kids talk about? What do they do? Right? And then think, what are they going to do with this information? What can they do with that information? How much of this information? I believe you should have conversations with your child so that they can develop linguistic skills. They need to develop language, learn how to put sentences together, and things like that. There is a lot of benefits to speaking to your child in complete sentences. I'm not saying talk to them like they are ignorant or deaf or, something where you're talking with a few words at a time or feeding. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking to you. I'm not telling you to talk to them as if they don't understand. I'm telling you to talk in a way that they can understand. What does that mean? For some kids, depending on their levels, you may need to speak slower and use shorter sentences. Do that as appropriate. But if they are, again, 5 years old, and let's use an example, say they're stealing, because that's a common 5-year old behavior. If the child is stealing, you telling a child they can go to jail is is unreasonable because one, children cannot visualize themselves as adults. They don't, even though they have an imagination, they've never been an adult, so they don't have any frame of reference or context to picture themselves in jail. They've never been, they don't know what it's like. You made it sound scary and they might be scared, but guess what? When you walk away, when that conversation's over, that idea of going to jail, or you will traumatize them and they will walk around telling everybody, my parent told me I was going to go to jail. And you may have seen your kids do that and embarrass you. That is not age appropriate. Talk about consequences that are appropriate for a 5-year old. Stealing is wrong. Why is stealing wrong? Well, it's what is stealing? Stealing is taking something that does not belong to you. Was this your toy? No. Did you get permission? No. Does the person know you have it? No. How do you think that person feels that you took something that they like or that was theirs without permission? Sad, mad, because it's the 5-year old. They're going to give you one word. So you're feeding them a little by little instead of lecturing to them for 5 minutes to 5 hours. They're not listening. They're going to forget what you said. It's not applied. And then you say, stealing is wrong and it can get you in a lot of trouble at school. You can get a mark in your folder. You can miss recess. You may not get free time or extra playtime at home. You may not be able to do these things if we find out you're stealing, right? That's age appropriate. Saying you're going to go to jail is wild. Is it true? Yes. But that is a conversation for a middle schooler or older. Now you can tell them as you get older, consequences change for your behavior. But again, if they're 5, you talk about what's appropriate for a 5-year-old. And that's the same thing as if you have a 15-year-old and they do something inappropriate on social media and you're upset and you go through their phone and you find out and you say, you can never have social media again. They will have social media. That's not age appropriate, or that doesn't actually make sense. Talk about the dangers of social media. Let them learn freedom of choice. They have to now learn life lessons if they continue. I believe a child should not have a phone if you do not trust them with the phone, because that's just causing more stress for everybody. Either they're allowed to have a phone or they're not. They will find out how to get on social media. Like I said before, I found out they can log in from their TV. So at this big age, you tell them the dangers. Now you can say, hey, people may send you unsolicited, inappropriate pictures. You should not send anyone inappropriate pictures because people can screenshot, people can edit what you're sending, people can unsend. You can get arrested for possession of inappropriate photos of other children, even as a child. You can be arrested and go to jail or be fined because at 15, they know what this is. Just socially, contextually, they've seen movies, they've watched shows, they have an understanding of, okay, getting in trouble at 15 is a lot different than getting in trouble at 5. When it comes to age appropriate conversations between these two ages and whatever ages, it's talking about what can you say to this person to get through to them now, because you need to always keep in mind you are an adult speaking to a child. As an adult, you're coming from an adult frame of reference. That level of maturity varies person to person, but you were thinking like an adult, and therefore you were likely naturally communicating like an adult, and you are expecting this child to relate and understand you as an adult, which is not true, and therefore unfair. Will they get some of what you say? Yes. Can they know if what you're saying makes sense? Yes, to an extent though, because you have to remember, depending on their level of development at that time, how much sticks with them varies by a lot. The younger they are, the less it sticks. Okay, and so when it comes to telling kids certain things, not just when it comes to teaching them lessons or consequences, how much you share about yourself, your life, your work, your relationships also need to be appropriate. There's certain things a young child doesn't need to know about your personal life. There's certain things a teenager doesn't need to know about. Certain things they don't need to know about your life. And to be fair, there's certain things none of your children should ever know about you. To be fair, but I think the way in which you communicate certain things, because you are teaching them a moment, when they're younger, you tell them, "Oh, everybody has a bad day. I woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Oh, sometimes people make me upset. My feelings are hurt when people lie to me." You're teaching emotional intelligence. That's relatability for a young child. As you get older, when you have a middle schooler and they're going through things, and you say, "Hey, I know how you feel. I'm not trying to take away from how you feel. I can only imagine how bad that feels because I had a friend lie to me. I had a friendship breakup too. I experienced this thing. I was tempted to do this thing as well. I had people offer to do this as well. And did you try it? You can share. The ins and out of those details, depending on your child and their maturity, may need to be left out. But then when they turn 16 and older, you may give more information about what it is exactly you were doing and how it affected you. Right? I'm a teen mom. How I got pregnant is none of my son's business. He's always known I'm a teen mom, though. Right? But I didn't say me and your dad had sex when he was 4. He also didn't ask how he got here at that age. But I'm just saying, that come about was not a conversation to have when he was younger. Now, as he's older, he understands. Me and your dad were 16 when we had kids. We were your age. The age you are now is the age we had you. Can you imagine having kids at this age? No, he cannot. He does not like the responsibilities he currently has. That's now age appropriate. But what a lot of times happens is when we have children, at times we're not prepared. We a lot of times take that out on the kids and tell them things. Well, if I had help and if this was this way and this is that way when they're younger, because that tends to be when our kids stresses out the most because they're the neediest and we're the most tired when they're young. And then we're taking it out on them and it's not appropriate because those kids do not know what to do with that information, which is why I said always ask yourself, what can they do about what I'm about to say and how will this help them? What are they supposed to do with this? Can they even conceptualize what you're saying? And if the answer is no, it's probably not age appropriate. It does not always mean avoid conversations altogether. For example, harder conversations. Do I think you need to teach your 5-year-old about sex? No, I do not. Can the conversation come up with the 5-year-old? Yes, it can. Why? Because they may be exposed by other people and other children. A lot of adults want to protect their kids from other adults, but you still have to protect them from other children because everybody is raised differently. So at 5, you may say when two people are together, they do things and they touch each other's private parts. We've talked about because your 5-year-old should know their private parts by name, and you say if they act right. And I only saying this from reference of once upon a time a few years ago, many years ago, there was a situation where a 5-year-old kid asked to give fellatio to another 5-year-old kid at school or daycare. I don't remember specifically. And you have to ask yourself, how did this kid know what that is to do that? Now, if your child is ignorant and does not know what that was, because they shouldn't, and this child says, hey, let me show you this trick or let me do this thing to you, your kid, if they are not aware of their body parts and those types of things and inappropriate touch, then they will allow the kid to do it. And then the kid grows up and find out they were inappropriately touched later because then they remember what happened to them when they were 5. So if your child is exposed to these things or ask about this, mom, what's sex? Right? Dad, what's this? Or what is this for? As they're touching themselves as they're playing in the bathtub, right? You're going to have some things to a minimum. That is your ex body part. It is yours. No one should touch it without your permission. At this age, no one should touch it without your parents' permission. It is wrong for people to touch you. And you give them boundaries around their body. Once they get to middle school, they've heard about it and they may have seen it, whether you know it or not. And if they ask about it or you hear about it or you see it in their phone, you got to talk about it head on. Hey, I know you know what this is. I don't know what all you know about it. Let's talk about it. What all have you heard about it? What else? What idea did you get from that movie? What did your friends say? Why? How did this conversation come up? Have an open conversation. So that, again, relatability, and so you can get closer to your children as a closer relationship. And you say, okay, some of what you said is true. This is not true, and here are the risks involved. By the time they get to high school, if you have not had that conversation in depth, be slightly concerned. Then you get into having babies and all the names of the STDs and different ways they're contracted. And you can get HPV just from kissing or holding hands and stuff like that. You don't have to have intercourse. Like that varies at each stage. And that's what I want you to keep in mind when it comes to age appropriate conversations. You saying all this and talking as much as I like to talk in these videos to a 3-year-old, 5-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old, they're not listening. And even if they are, they can look you dead in your eyes. They don't know what the hell you're talking about, and they're going to forget because they have not lived enough life to attach what you're talking about to anything, and therefore it's going to get lost. Most of the things that we remember, the things that we relate and we can apply to our lives, we can see it practically. A child that is still innocent does not have anything to relate what you're talking about to for the information to attach to. Therefore, the information will get lost. Moral of the story. So, talk to your kids. We talked about the power of transparency. say sorry. We talked about parenting from trauma, and be mindful how you share your trauma with your kids, because not everything is appropriate. Like I've said before, get a friend, get a therapist. It won't hurt to get both. One is usually more affordable than the other, depending on how your relationships look. But share what makes sense to the child at that particular age, despite how you feel, despite how upset you are, despite what they've done, what they've said. And also be mindful, just because they've said something does not mean they know what they're talking about. Kids are going to repeat things, and you cannot assume because they've repeated it, they know what they're saying. A 5 year old, 3 year old, you may have one that says everything you say. If you curse, they curse. They don't know what the definition of these curse words. You do. They're just, because at that age they're learning. Remember, they're figuring out their autonomy. I talked about the stages of development. They're figuring out who they are. This is a cool word. My mom says it all the time. My cousin says it all the time. I'm gonna say this word. Can't hurt. If they say it all the time, it must not be a bad word. And then you telling them it is a bad word. But if it's bad, why do you use it? If drugs are bad, why do you do drugs? Drinking is, then you run into being a hypocrite. So when you're having these conversations, be mindful. They are talking like their 11-year-old cousin, brother, sister, or me and my spouse, but they are only three, they're only four. And they don't understand that you're an adult and you have free will, because they are four and they also have free will that you are trying to manage and course correct along the way. But how you course correct varies by age. I hope that makes sense.